All right, let's get started. We don't want to go too long here. So if a paper due tomorrow, so what I want to do is talk about that. And then actually want to talk about paper one. I've seen several of y'all's papers, so that's good. Then I want to talk about exam one prep, what we're going to do next week. And then, boy, Bill Gates has just messed this whole thing up. I don't know why he does it like that. And then a real quick intro to paper two, because there's not much you can do on that right now anyway, and you probably shouldn't. You should finish paper one and get ready for exam one. But I want to at least get you ready for what's coming on paper two. Paper two is a pretty exciting one, actually. For a lot of students, it's their favorite one. All right. So yeah, paper one tomorrow. The biggest thing I'm seeing is on the clarity part, it's a lack of use of good transitions with titles, and you know, if you're gonna put ISM in there, make sure you explain why it's in there, because your boss didn't ask for that. Have a transition, make sure you talk about your view of the overall economic data before you get into the market, so you make sure you can set up the market well. Then make sure the data is correct. I'm still seeing some erroneous data, so make sure you got the right day, the right day. That you're not, I've seen a couple of papers where they're pulling either the wrong day or just the wrong data. So be real clear on that. So I've looked at a few papers. I'm somewhat time crunched to do much with your papers from this point. So I'd recommend, if you want comments on your paper at this point, you can send it to me and highlight what you want me to comment on, because I'm going to have a tough time reading entire papers, because I've got about 140 something papers to grade this weekend, so it's going to be a little rough. So past this point, my time gets really limited. I got a bunch of Zoom calls the rest of the day, and then I got another class, 2 more classes tonight, and then a class this weekend, and I'm just grading constantly this weekend. So if you haven't gotten to me yet, it's going to have to be pretty quick. You can definitely call me in the mornings when I'm on the bike. I just can't look at your paper, but you can definitely call and talk and ask questions. So any final questions on paper one? My goal is to have it graded by next Tuesday. We'll see if I can actually do that. I'll do my best. This isn't a hard paper for me to grade because it's fairly straightforward data, but we'll see. It might have to be next Wednesday, but I'll do my best.
Sir, is paper one just due at midnight?
Well, I think I put it as 6. I don't count up. It's a little bit late, but it's 60 people, and I need to grade 12 papers a day to get it done in 5 days. So I need to have 12 papers by 6 o'clock tomorrow. I may not get them all graded by Tuesday. So
okay, yes, sir.
That's the downside. Some of you are done, so just if you're done, send them in. Don't hold them out just because you might think of something at 11:58 p.m. on Friday. So the more I can get graded, the better on Friday, because I do have to teach a class on Saturday, so it really eats into my grading time. Any other questions on paper one? Now, what happens tomorrow then? Does the unemployment report come out tomorrow, or does it come out next week? I can't remember.
I think it comes out tomorrow.
Yeah, it usually does. There's a few times where it comes out the second Friday. So we'll see if you're not up tomorrow morning. Yeah, it does come out tomorrow. If you're not eagerly up looking for that report tomorrow, then I failed miserably. They're saying tomorrow they're expecting 800,000 jobs added. They expect unemployment to drop another 0.2% down to 8.2%. We'll see. You know, it's still funny that, you know, we look at 800,000 jobs tomorrow and like, wow, that's a disappointment. We were at 1.7 million, but 800,000 would still be an incredible number in any other year but this year. Even back in the 2008 crisis, 800,000 jobs would have just been phenomenal coming back out of that recession. So we're still seeing, I know again this week, the jobless claims were just 800 and something thousand a day. People were saying, oh, that's good. That's a good drop. at 800,000 would still be a record number other than this year. So hopefully you're getting, you're thinking about these things that your peers in the business are thinking about. You got to get in the habit of looking for these things. All right.
Professor, I have a question about paper one.
Okay.
As far as graphs go, would you recommend putting like a graph for pretty much every topic?
Graph or table.
You can put.
It's, if you need to make a point that, wow, this is a really good recovery, it's easier to do that in graph than do it in words. If you're talking about the stock market, to me, the stock market saying its initial reaction was flat. Then after an hour or so, it dropped dramatically. Then it recovered the rest of the day. That's a lot easier to say in a graph than it is to say in words. You can certainly say the high for the day was this, the low for the day was this. So it moved, you can give those kind of percentages, but the graph really does it. On the participation rate, the unemployment rate, those are pretty impressive, especially this year. You have more really cool graphs to do this year than we've ever had in the past. Last year was the same number month after month after month. It was just a straight line, but you've got an incredible graph. But you need a graph if you're trying to make a point, and the graphic answers it. That's good. It could be a table if you just want to summarize some numbers. Some students have summarized the numbers in a table, but you still have to talk about them. But there's no rules on it. It's a communication piece. So when I look at graphs and those kind of things, that's where I'm grading the critical thinking. You're trying to make a point. Did you make the point strongly with the graph? Could you have made it better with the graph versus in words? Those kind of things.
Okay, and as based on your checklist, as far as like implications for economy, do you mean like our own implications based on the information that we've gathered, or like professional?
Well, some people, they talk about it as you go. Some of them are pretty obvious. A higher number is better, lower number is worse. You can certainly give your opinion, and you should. Supporting it with quotes from experts makes it a lot stronger paper, especially for your boss, since you're going to be entry-level employee. They're going to want to see some quotes from people who know what they're doing. So all of that is in there. Just make sure you don't just give the numbers and don't talk about what does this mean. Is this good news or bad news? And you can talk about stuff that's not in the report. This report looks strong. However, if Congress doesn't pass more stimulus, it's possible these numbers are going to deteriorate, something along those lines. Okay. All right. Anything else on paper one? Okay, so next week we're going to have Zoom sessions. Just a few things on the Zoom sessions. Boy, I don't know what Bill Gates is doing to me here. So first of all, I'm gonna keep the same groups. So if you didn't like the group you were in last time, I'll send out that list. The Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday will be the same. Last time I had several people last second see the need to switch groups, and I had no trouble switching them. If you can go earlier, Tuesday or Wednesday, that's actually better because we have way too many on Thursdays. So I prefer to have few. So if you're willing to switch, especially the Wednesday, let me know. But I'll keep them the same. So what are we going to do? So there's two questions. There's question one. I'll talk about that today, which is all essay, and will be open book and must be submitted at 2:30 on exam day. I forget when the exam day is, if it's the week after next on Tuesday or the week after next on Thursday. So that's one. We'll talk about that today. The other one is the question two, which is the tactical. That one it will be distributed. Yeah, I mean everything. Boy, it's like Bill Gates is watching me just mess it up here. So question two, it's going to be the tactical. It will be distributed at 2:30 on exam day. There will probably be multiple versions just to make sure people aren't sharing between each other. And it will have a strict time allotment. So you have 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes, and you have to answer it in that 30 minutes. How do you spell strict? Strict with a T. All right. So what I'm going to do on question one is I'm going to go over question one today, real high level, because that's several hours of lecture. So I'm not going to actually do the lecture again. So I'm going to go over question one. Question two, I put an example on Blackboard from the prior semester with the student answer. And the student answered, she got 100%, but she didn't get everything right. She got 100% because you had to get like 16 out of 18 to get 100%. She had one thing that was wrong, and I actually marked the one thing she got wrong with an X. She talked about inflation, where inflation really wasn't an issue at all. So I disagree with her on that one. There really wasn't anything in there that would have recommended what she said on inflation. Not that it was wrong, it's just that she didn't explain it well enough to make a convincing case. So what I'm going to do is, for the Zoom sessions, I will send a prior exam 1 question 2 question for you to submit by your Zoom session, and we'll actually grade that one in your Zoom session next week. All right, so you'll have the question, you'll answer it. You should practice answering it within 30 minutes. So you definitely need to study for this question. You shouldn't rely on the fact that it's open notes, because you're not going to have time to go back to your notes. You need to study for it as if it's closed notes. I think some students are going to bomb this question because they won't study for it enough in advance. You really need to know it backwards and forwards before you take it. So practice it and you should practice it without looking at your notes. You should try to answer it all without looking at your notes. This is important stuff. You should know this stuff even 5 years from now. So this is stuff you should be learning permanently. So go ahead and start working on getting that into your permanent memory. So that will be our focus for the Zoom sessions. On the question 1, I do want you to submit that for the Zoom session, but we won't grade it in the Zoom session. We just don't have time. So the Zoom sessions next week will only be grading. You'll be grading your tactical answer. I'll walk through it, and you'll grade it, and you can figure out what grade you would have gotten if you'd had that. But you'll also submit question 1, even though we're not going to grade question 1 next week. One thing I'm definitely going to look at in your submissions, which is extremely important, I'm really worried on question 1 that students are going to get no credit at all because they did nothing but copy and paste the notes. So I'll be using safe assign. If you have too much overlap with the notes, you'll get 0 credit. So if you submitted it early, I can at least check then if someone has a serious problem with copying notes too much or copying another student's paper, which is a real disaster. I can at least address that before the exam rather than coming up after the exam. But if it comes up after the exam, it definitely will get a student zero credits. So, all right. So any questions about the Zooms next week? You'll have either a Zoom on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. It'll go about 25 minutes. I'll record them, but I won't make the recordings available. It's a big part of your participation grade, so you need to be on there for the participation. You need to submit your answers to get the participation credit. So you'll have a question, a specific question to answer. And so, here's the exam. I'll show you the exam. It's very straightforward. There's only 2 questions. Oops. Oh, I've already had it open. There's only 2 questions. Thanks, Bill Gates. Again, I don't know why he thinks I want a 4 there. I don't. But your first question is all of that stuff that we talked about. And I'm going to give you the outline for that. And then the second question is the example I'm going to mail out, and that you have an example answer on Blackboard. The general scenario in here is students average 85% on question 1, and anywhere from 0 to 90% on question 2, with the class average probably being 60 to 70% on question 2. So question 2, 90% of the time students do worse on question 2 than question 1. That's unfortunate because question 2 is actually, I think, the more important one. Question 1 is just organizing and spitting back what we talked about in class. Question 2 is application, which is the critical thinking. Do you really understand it? So I actually would prefer you do better. The 50 minutes doesn't really mean much on question 1 because you have all the time you need now because we're doing it outside of class. I'll give you 30 minutes for question 2, but the 50 and the 25 tells you how much they're worth. Question 1 is worth 50 75ths of the exam, and question 2 is 25 75ths, 1/3 of the exam. So question 1 is 2/3, question 2 is 1/3. All right, before I do a quick outline of question 1, any questions on what we're doing next week? Very similar to what we did with the Zoom sessions with paper 1. So get paper 1 in tomorrow and then start working on exam 1, and then you'll be ahead of the game, and then you can just spend next weekend just finalizing up what you need to do for exam 1. No questions? And I'll put this in the email tomorrow as well, including emailing you the example. So I'll send. So I will email a practice question, which will actually be the exam question from a couple of semesters. The example I have out there on Blackboard is from last semester because I actually had the submission electronically, so I could actually share with you the submission. All right, let me do a quick overview for what I'm looking for on question 1. I want to make sure everybody has it. This is an outline. This is not your answers, so make sure you're giving me a whole lot more than this. But this is a high level, very high level outline. So the first thing is define investment portfolio. This is one where, you know, it will probably be really close to what's in the notes, but try your best to put your own words in there if you can, but it's going to be tough to change that one up too much. So there's one place where you're probably okay. Past that point, everything should be in your own words. There's no reason for you to copy and paste. In fact, do not create your answer for this question by doing any copying and pasting at all. You can look at the notes and then type freehand off the top of your head without looking at the notes. They give me a really good answer. I will grade on clarity. Make sure your paragraphs are short. You can use bullets, but make sure your paragraphs are short. Make sure you have a lot of bolding and highlighting that make it a really good looking paper. It should look more like a paper than just an exam answer. The second thing is the 3 questions. The why are you investing? Remember that was, you've got to talk some about horizon there. What you can invest in, that's where you talk about parsimony. And the how, and you have the 3 areas there that's discussed there. You know, are you going to do it yourself, hire someone else? Are you going to be active or passive? Are you going to be, how tactical are you going to be? Do you have a tactical allocation? Those 3 areas we talked about there. And then you're going to delve into the what question, which classes. So the first thing there is you have the 4 major asset classes with extra discussion on cash versus bonds. Hopefully you remember that, right? Cash and bonds are essentially exactly the same thing, but you're talking about cash being short-term with bonds being longer-term, and cash with reinvestment risk, but very low price risk, bonds with varying levels of price and reinvestment risk. So the 4 asset classes, define them, and then you'll talk about cash. Remember the model here when you talk about the asset classes? You're going to define, talk about sub-asset classes, and then talk about the tactical. So you need to have those 3 things in your answer. For cash, you just define, and that's about it. There are no sub-asset classes. And then with bonds, what do you do on bonds? DC cuts I. But remember, on every one of these sub-asset classes, so define sub-asset classes and the tactical. You need those for every single one of these. So a good example is duration. Define duration is how sensitive the bond is to changes in interest rates. You should probably give the equation that talks about, you know, the percentage change in a bond equals minus duration times the change in yield. Sub-asset classes, we talked about short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. Tactical, if you expect interest rates to fall, you want to lengthen duration. You expect interest rates to rise, you want to shorten duration. All right? So you need to do that for each one of these. Some of these don't have sub-asset classes, like structure. There is no sub-asset class on that. On taxes, you either have taxable or tax exempt. For inflation, you either have inflation linked or non-inflation linked. Sometimes the sub-asset classes aren't that big of a deal. But think in terms on each one of these. Sometimes you have a formula you need to place, like on taxes. You talk about that. So I'm not going to go through all of those. You've already seen those in the notes. Then you have stocks, and that's where we have bucks. Guess what you do there? Define sub-asset classes. And with the exception of the U, you want tactical. So a good example is beta is the B. So define it. You have cyclical stocks. You have defensive stocks. So define it is your sensitivity of the stock to overall economy. Sub-asset class is defensive, cyclical stocks, and tactical. If you expect a recession, you want to move to defensive stocks. If you're expecting recovery, you want to move to cyclical stocks, all right? So the tactical on US versus non-US, that's a little more difficult. So you essentially, you remember though on US versus non-US, put something in there about the US dollar. Remember the sub-asset classes though. You have US securities, you have developed markets, emerging markets, frontier markets. On the C, you have large cap, medium cap, small cap, macro cap. On the S, you have growth, you have value stocks. For each one of them, define them, give the sub-asset classes, define the sub-asset classes, and then talk about the tactical approach. When would you buy growth stocks? When do you buy value stocks? All right. And I would, in your definition of value and growth, remember value stocks are low quality companies and growth stocks tend to be high quality companies. And I will help you know that we want to avoid value stocks during a recession. I know it hasn't worked so well this last time, but that's a general thought. And then the last one is alternatives. Make sure here you have the 2 reasons for alternatives. Diversification and inflation hedge for real assets. You could have put that up earlier when you listed the four asset classes. You have the subcategories: real assets, commodity, real assets, venture capital. Under real assets, you got real estate, timber, commodities, and then other. So make sure you're talking through all of these. The tactical, again, here just depends. You know, if you need diversification or if you're worried about inflation, that's where it comes in. All right, so there's that question. There's a lot you can do there. This is what, about 40 pages in the notes or 30 pages in the notes? There's a lot there. And I just told you can't copy and paste it to your answers, so you're going to have to spend some time on this. The reason I'm doing the Zoom sessions and requiring you to submit it for the Zoom sessions is some students would wait until the day before the exam to do this. You just can't do that. It's way too late. And you try to do this in a way that you can remember it 5 years from now. All right, but that is the answer. Any questions on this? The fact that it's open notes means I actually grade it more strictly. I'm actually a little bit harder grader. I prefer this not be open notes because you actually should know this. You shouldn't memorize any of this. You should just know it. If you're a finance major especially, there's nothing in this entire thing, all 30 pages, that you should not know. So go ahead and put it in your permanent memory now. There's no reason to put this in short-term memory. And especially there's no reason to, you know, just rehash the notes and put it in your answer and don't even think about what you're typing. Make sure you're learning this stuff. It's extremely important. I would not hire anyone who did not know all of this stuff as an undergraduate student. This is the basics that everyone expects you to know in an interview, so you might as well learn it now. All right, I'm not hearing any questions. I don't know how many people are still on here. 23, not even half the class, but all right. All right, so one last thing I want to talk about then is paper 2. Paper 2 is an earnings announcement report. To me, it's pretty cool. This is another paper I wish I could do. I love doing these type of papers. What we generally do with this is you look for a firm that's releasing earnings in October, and your boss has said, "Hey, we own Costco stock. Their earnings come out on Thursday. I need a report on my desk at the end of Thursday on what this earnings announcement did." If you have a company you really want me to add to the list, you can only do firms that I actually set up because you don't have access to the Bloomberg machines. So I'm going to have to go out there and create data for multiple companies, and you'll have to pick one of the ones I set up. So if there's a company you really want me to do, that's fine. It has to be a company that reported earnings in October, maybe September, October, or else it doesn't work. I can't do a company that reported earnings back in July. That's just too long ago. So, so if you have one in mind, let me know. Otherwise, what I do is I pick companies that have wild reports, huge misses. So maybe they expected $1.20 and maybe they reported 32 cents, something like that. I'll look for those. And the other way as well, they expected $1.20 and they reported $2.18. So I want huge wild reports or wild market reactions. Those are the two things I'm looking for. What I like the best are the illogical ones. I love those the best. They beat on earnings and the stock price falls dramatically. How often do you think that happens? A firm beats, they were expecting $1.20, they reported $1.30, and the stock price falls. Or they expected $1.20, they reported 80 cents, and the stock price shot up. How often would that happen? Guess what? That happens about 40% of the time. Some people think, wow, if I knew what they were going to report in earnings, I could really beat the stock market. Well, actually, that would only help you 60% of the time. So 40% of the time, a firm will beat and their stock price goes down, or they'll miss and their stock price will go up. So I really like those. So I'm looking for ones where you have, it's kind of like your first paper. We actually got a pretty good report this time. There's a lot to write about. I'm doing the same thing with paper two. I'm looking for companies where there's actually something pretty interesting to write about. So you really can't do anything there until I put the data together. What that means is you won't have as much time for this paper as you had for others, because by the time I put all the data together, you'll have to move. I can't remember exactly when the paper is due, so I should look at that real quickly. But it'd probably be less time to write than you had for this first paper. So, so just be ready to go. I'll make sure to tell you when I put that Excel file out there. Yeah, it's due November 6th. So I'll probably get you the data somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd week of October. It is a paper you can write all in one setting. It's a paper that's not too difficult to get a pretty good draft within a couple of hours. And there are things that you can do to help with this paper. And I'll give you some resources. I'm going to give you an Excel spreadsheet. And it's going to provide everything you need as far as revenues, whether they beat or hit, net income, whether it beat or hit, margins, whether or not they beat or hit. I'm going to provide you the Bloomberg Intelligence, which is an analysis on that. So what you have to do is find, I might even provide you the earnings conference call. We'll see how much time it takes me to collect all of those. But you might actually want to listen to the earnings conference call. But what you have to do for this, you need to find articles and write the paper, all right? I do everything but write the paper for you, but you got to find some good articles. So you want to start doing that pretty quickly. What I'll try to do, if I decide I'm going to do a company, I might email that out immediately so that you can start looking for articles that day. It's best to find articles the day of the earnings announcement. So something you might want to do, if there's a company you're really interested in, you might go out to an earnings calendar and see who's reporting earnings each day throughout the month of October. And if you see a company you're really interested in, email me, let me know, and I'll keep an eye out for it, and I can make that one of my companies. But I got to go to Bloomberg. I got to go to the Bloomberg machine and collect all the data. It's unfortunate. I actually prefer that you collect the data yourself so you can get some practice using Bloomberg. but we just can't do that this semester. So I'm going to be doing a lot of the work for you. You just have to then write the paper, but you do have to go out and find some good articles and other things. I do encourage you to listen to the earnings call. You don't have to, but that's a really good thing to do. Do some practice before you go to an interview that say that you've actually listened in on the earnings conference call. You know what that's all about. What does management talk about? They're pretty boring calls, no question, especially the first 45 minutes where the CFO is just kind of talking nonstop about really unimportant stuff. But at the end, when the analysts come in with their questions, it can get really heated and really interesting. I don't know if y'all know the famous earnings call from a couple of years ago where Elon Musk essentially was telling the analysts they were idiots and he was insulting them. That's not a good call. But they can get really heated, really interesting. So if you're as a company you're really interested in, maybe it's in your portfolio, or maybe you want to work for that company, so you want to get yourself some exposure to the company and thinking about it, let me know and I'll look and we'll see what we have out there. I'll be looking every day in October to see what companies are reporting. If I see a company's stock price move 15-20%, yeah, that would be a good one to put in to report because you have more to write about. All right, that's all I want to talk about today. Any final questions or any questions at all on anything?
So
What was the due date again?
I'm sorry?
What was the due date? In November, right?
Yeah, it's November 6th.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll probably get the data to you like by October 15th or 20th or something like that.
And then for the exam one questions, so basically it's kind of just going to be like, hey, here's your uncle. He's going to give you like, or he has like $100,000. What do you want him to do with it? Kind of sort of like that? Or
No, question one, you don't have to be specific. You need to give the template in class.
Okay.
So, investment portfolio is a collection of assets that are held for a future purpose, like retirement. When setting up a portfolio for someone, you need to ask 3 questions. Why are you investing? And what can you invest? How are we going to execute? So do it more generically, that question. Question 2 is going to look exactly like the example. Your boss believes interest rates are going to rise. She believes there's going to be a recession, whatever. You look at that and then, so look at the student example. The example, it shows you exactly what the exam will look like, except for obviously I'll change it up. And I'll do a few multiple versions. So look at that example, and then you can see the student answer to see what I'm looking for there. You could say, if my uncle were to come to me with some money, what would I do? But just keep it pretty generic. It's a pretty lengthy answer. Your answer should run on for some time. So I've actually essentially I've created a new paper for you to write. Instead of doing 4 papers, we're going to do 5 papers because exam 1 question is going to essentially be a paper. It's a pretty lengthy, and it's 20-30 pages in the notes, so it's not insignificant.